Phil, I want to start with you. And Mike Memoli just mentioned this, that the Trump administration, as we know by now, often says the quiet part out loud. And departing advisor Kellyanne Conway did just that late last week when talking about this unrest. Take a look at this.
The more chaos and anarchy and vandalism and violence reigns, the better it is for the very clear choice on who's best on public safety and law and order.
So the president can't campaign on the economy. He can't campaign on his handling of the coronavirus. So he's apparently taking a page out of his old playbook, which is stoking fear and division.
That does appear to be what's happening, Jeff. And by the way, Kellyanne Conway's comments there, she's not the only one in Trump's orbit who believes that. And in my reporting over the last couple of days with a number of Trump advisors, they feel that this continued unrest in Kenosha, in Portland, potentially in other cities later into the fall is only going to help Trump politically. What they are trying to do, and they're very clear about it, they're trying to scare women voters, white women voters in the suburbs who supported Donald Trump in 2016, but who went with Democrats in the 2018 midterms. And they're trying to bring them back into the fold and make them fearful of what this unrest would mean going forward. And to do so, the president's going to be reiterating that law and order message and make people feel like he's the only one who can bring some order to the streets. Of course, Joe Biden is not the president. This is all happening on Trump's watch. And all you have to do is look at the president's Twitter feed to see how he is trying to instigate some of the conflict playing out across our country.
And Michael Steele, this is precisely what the president did in the run-up to the 2018 midterms. He fanned fears about a migrant caravan that was set to infiltrate the U.S. He even suggested that there might be terrorists from the Middle East who might join with the caravan. Voters didn't buy it. Democrats flipped the House. Campaigning on fear is easy, but the question is, will it be effective? Will it be effective this time around, do you think?
Well, there's a difference between caravans coming from the Mexican U.S. border as opposed to seeing flames burning, in a trash can, or a building being, having windows broken in the town neighboring you. So the fear factor is very, very different, and so it's closer to home, and you feel it more. You feel more connected to it. You're not connected to a caravan coming across the border if you're in Western Pennsylvania, but if you see the kind of violence that's taking place in Portland and Kenosha and elsewhere, somehow your visceral reaction to it is different. And that's what Trump is preying on. But here's the part that sort of rubs me raw on this, Jeff, and that is we are yet again in a situation where, and this is what Trump is picking at, that when African-American community says enough, that you've got to pay attention to the pain that we are experiencing, you've got to listen to what we're saying, suddenly we pivot to white fear. We're no longer talking about the underlying causes for this controversy, for these actions that are happening on the street. We're now concerned about white people being afraid. And so that's the pivot that Trump wants to make, to your very point, that, those white suburban women are now more concerned, or at least this is the Trump thinking, will now be more concerned about their own safety as opposed to their underlying concern about what's going on really in the Black community, which they're genuinely interested in doing something about. So what has to happen for Biden is he's got to come out and pivot us off of this notion that we should be afraid of each other. No, we should be afraid of Trump, because this is his universe. This is his world that he's created. And as we witnessed from the tweets this weekend, this is the world that he is stoking every day with more and more fear.
And Phil, to Michael Steele's great point, I mean, this is actually borne out in polling data. There's new polling that shows white Americans in battleground states, in places like Wisconsin, they're not as supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement as they were earlier this summer in the immediate aftermath of the police killing of George Floyd. Now, part of this, and this is just my own opinion, is that Black Lives Matter, that movement is being applied to protesters broadly and inappropriately, and the actual message is being drowned out by people who might be social justice demonstrators, but they're not really Black Lives Matter affiliated. But what is the risk here? What is the political risk for Democrats in a state like Wisconsin?
Well, first of all, Jeff, your theory sounds just about right, because there has been widespread support in this country for the ideals and the values of Black Lives Matter. And it's worth pointing out that President Trump, according to all the polling data in the summer, was very much on the wrong side of that issue. But the fear for Democrats in those upper Midwestern states, in Wisconsin, also in Michigan, and also notably in Minnesota, where my reporting shows some Democrats are increasingly nervous about softening there for Biden. That, of course, is the epicenter of this movement, Minneapolis being where George Floyd was killed several months back. There is concern there that these images and that this law and order message from the president is working to start to pry away some of those white voters. I was talking to Congresswoman Debbie Dingell the other day. She represents a suburban Detroit district, and she said she drives around her district and she has seen a lot of Blue Lives Matter signs popping up in suburban neighborhoods, and that has given her serious pause. And she's been communicating that with the Biden campaign.
And Phil, as you've been speaking, the president, of course, has been tweeting. He says that Portland is a mess, and if the mayor can't clean it up, we'll clean it up for them. Michael Steele, Joe Biden plans to ask voters today, do you feel safe in Donald Trump's America? Is that a strong enough counter argument? How should Joe Biden address this issue without playing on Trump's turf?
Well, that's always the trickiest part, because Trump wants you to play on his turf. So, yeah, I think that's the beginning of an important message. But I think there has to be a higher level of emphasis and condemnation of the violence that we've seen so far. What makes the white fear narrative work is that they feel that the Biden campaign or Democrats or whatever aren't addressing that they're just allowing it to happen without recourse or without any type of response. So that's going to be the first important step, is to declaratively state exactly what you think and feel about the violence, and then to emphasize what that violence is doing and why as president, you would have a better handle and control over mitigating that violence, as opposed to what Trump is doing, which is, encouraging it by, praising the people in their caravans and going on, to protest in Portland. Well, we know what that is. So that's going to be a hard thing to do, because in my estimation, they've waited too long. They wasted last week. They've wasted the weeks before leading up to this, pretty much remaining silent. So they've allowed this narrative to settle in with a lot of those white suburban voters, which everyone and their brother knew is going to be the focal point of this election. And so now they've got to unring that bell in a way that benefits Biden. And that's going to be tough to do, because once the fear sets in, to get people to be unafraid, Jeff, as you know, is not the easiest thing. You've got to come together with some real strong evidence for why they shouldn't be afraid.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.